right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Rachel. I'm so excited to have you on. For those that are listening, Rachel is an intuitive life coach. So welcome to the new and improved podcast.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here.
So Rachel and I have been talking a little bit. I did a live in Rachel's Facebook group recently, and we kind of got chatting about my podcast and all this sort of stuff. So I thought, why not have her on and talk a little bit more about what we've been talking about in our, DMs basically. And so Rachel wanted to jump on and talk a bit about human design. So Rachel, what can you tell us about human design in business, entrepreneurship, personal development, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I think human design is just a really important thing to know when you are like starting an entrepreneurship kind of journey or starting your own business, because it really shapes so many things of the way you interact or the way you're going to communicate with other people. And by really like stepping into your human design, you can make sure that you're making your business as like efficient for your kind of body and your energy type as you possibly can. So I think when I've been looking at the entrepreneurship journey, like everybody wants to start like a manifestor and work like a generator, but you can't do both of those if you're not both of them, which you can't be both of them. So I think it's really important to find your human design and where your kind of magic and your energy really lives, so you can work with what you have rather than trying to make yourself and your business, your physical body just.
Oh, I think you've cut out. Are you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, that was interesting. That totally cut out at the end. Sorry, can you just say repeat that last little bit?
Yeah, so it's just really important that you make sure when you're working in your business that you're working with like the physical body and the energy that you have, rather than trying to make it something that you don't have.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. So what's the difference between a generator and a manifestor? Is a manifestor someone that, I guess manifests something into existence from their thoughts and actions, as opposed to a generator who's maybe just doing the physical? Like, can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so there are actually 5 types in human design. So there are generators and manifesting generators, which are very similar in like their makeup and the way that they interact with the world. Then there are manifestors, projectors, and reflectors. So the biggest difference is, from my perspective in a business, is have this like sacred energy in their body. So they're very go, go, go. They can work all day. They have a lot of natural energy. They kind of create their own energy. Whereas the other 3 types, projectors, manifestors, and reflectors, don't have those internal motors. So it's really, really important for those other 3 types to really find their sort of like creative flows and run with them when they have them. Because if someone like me, as a manifestor, tries to work all day, I'm going to get really burnt out. I'm not going to feel very creative. The stuff I make just isn't going to feel very authentic because I don't have that internal motor that a generator does. So I think that's the most important part about it.
That's interesting. So how do manifestors not get burnt out then?
So I'm a manifestor, so obviously I know the most about that type. So it's really important for manifestors. We get these kind of like creative urges and creative flows. And it's really important for us to, when you get that like inspiration, because every type has a strategy too. So our strategy as manifestors is to initiate. So once we get that idea, it's really important for us to kind of like run with it and ride that creative wave. And when it stops, it's really important for us to give ourselves time to stop and relax and regenerate and rejuvenate. Because if, like I said, if we keep going and going like that, we're going to burn out. So that was the most important thing for me in my business, was really learning to ride those creative waves. And when there isn't one, to be okay with there not being one. Because I think when you start your own business, you're like, I have 400,000 things to do and I need to get them all done. But once you kind of really lean into your human design and learn how to make it work for you rather than what works for most people. And 70% of the world are generators or manifesting generators. So that's where we get this go, go, go attitude from, because 70% can do that all day, every day, and it's good for them. Whereas the other 30% of us, if we do that, we're going to get really sick really quickly.
That is really interesting, because it's funny, because as a nurse and midwife, you've got to be on the go and on your toes the entire shift, right? You can't really stop and start. It's literally just walk in the door and boom, 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 boom. And at the end of the day, I get really tired and exhausted. But if I'm working in my business, I think like the energy expenditure is different. You know, I could have 2 or 3 coaching calls that day and then I might be completely bombed, or I might have another day where it's like I'm in creative flow and I can literally work like 6 plus hours straight. So I'm kind of
Yeah,
curious.
definitely.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a bit curious. Yeah, like, so how can you figure out what you are? Like, is there a test or a quiz or something like that you can take?
Yeah, so human design is all based on the time and place you were born. So you need to know the two things. You need to know the exact time and obviously where you were born in the world.
Mm.
There's a couple of different places online that you can do it. My favorite is mybodygraph.com. So you put your details in there and it will tell you what your type is, what your strategy is, and then there's a thing called authority too. So your authority is really important because it's how you make your best decisions. So that's another part of it that's really important to kind of lean into as an entrepreneur.
Wow, that's fascinating. I've never heard of this before. So I'm definitely gonna, like, when we finish this episode, I'm gonna go off and have a bit more of a learn about this. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it's one of those things that I don't really remember when I found, but it has completely changed the way I interact with other people and the way I interact in my business, and really leaning into that initiation part of my being. So the cool thing about human design is that it's based on your like physical makeup, because the idea is that our minds are very malleable. They're very they can change. We're very much in control of them, whereas our bodies are the physical things on this earth. They are made, of the same things that make up the earth with our nitrogen and carbon. So they are the thing that we should lean into, because that is the most physical part of us in this physical world, which I just think is so cool.
Wow, that is amazing. And so if you can get the two to work together, then you've got like the ultimate combination, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. So it really is about finding your power in who you are.
That's
Your
fascinating.
authority is like leaning into that part of your body to make the best decision, be your most authentic self by using everything that you already have, rather than trying to be someone that you're not.
Yeah, I love that. Like, one of the things that I've learned and implemented in my business and even in my life in general is like, so for example, like growing up in school, I was always into like the creative stuff, but also like psychology, biology, English, that sort of thing. I was never really into chemistry, physics, maths, like any of that sort of stuff. So,
Yeah.
and I used to resent myself for that as I got older, because I was like, God, it would have been good if I was excellent at those things. And then I've just kind of learned to be like, you know what? I am who I am. I'm good at what I'm good at. I'm going to work to my strengths, and the things that I'm not great at, I'll just have to outsource.
Yeah, I feel like everyone has their realms of genius, and we really need to embrace your realm of genius, because not everyone's meant to be great at physics. We're not all meant to be physicists, but in the same breath, not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur, not everyone's meant to be a graphic designer. So if we all really embrace the things that we are naturally good at and also naturally really passionate about, we're going to just create this world where everyone can be more authentic and more, yeah, just authentic in what they're doing, and more passionate about what they're doing in their life too.
100%, because you could spend a lot of time and energy trying to be good at something that you're just naturally not good at, as opposed to just working to your strengths and saving yourself time and energy. Like, if I, like, even for example, having this podcast editor that I've got now, if I sat there all day and edited my podcast, it would drive me bonkers. It would
Yeah,
waste so much
absolutely.
energy. Yeah. And then I would be like in a tilted energy for the rest of the day and probably wouldn't be as productive or effective and all that sort of stuff. So I figure, you know what, I'm just going to stick in my lane, focus on what I do best, and then just find other people that can help me out with the other stuff that I'm not so great at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's when you go on your entrepreneurial journey too, I think it's really important to have that in mind, and just have the mindset that it's okay for me to pay someone to do it that's better than me. It's like, if you want to build a website, you could spend, the next 7 months on Squarespace trying to make it the way you want it to. But if you look at it in the long run, it's going to be better for you to just pay someone to do it for you. Like it's a good mindset to get into too. I'm going to invest in myself to save myself time and energy to do what I'm good at.
Yeah, I agree. I've had a few people reach out to me, over the last year about, starting a podcast. Like, what do they do? Where do they start? Because it's not the most easy, seamless process, right? It takes a bit of research, pull the puzzle pieces together and stuff. And I said to them, you know what? it depends how much time you've got. And if you're someone that wants to get into the nitty gritty tech side of stuff, I was like, I did everything from scratch myself. But in hindsight, if I knew at the time that I could just hired someone for like $50 to $100 to set it all up for me behind the scenes, in hindsight, I totally would have done that. But I didn't realize, so if I could rewind time, I would do that differently. And that's what I tell people now who reach out to me. They're like, where do I even start? What do I do? And I'm like, you know what? The process was actually rather complicated. I can't even remember step by step. I just said, get onto YouTube and have a bit of a research and watch some videos on how people have started it. But even that wasn't that helpful for me when I started. So yeah, if anyone's listening to this podcast right now wants to start their own podcast, I definitely recommend getting on some apps like Upwork or Airtasker, putting an ad out there and people can bid on the particular task that you're wanting. And that just saves you time. You just throw a little bit of money at the problem and then boom, you're already a step ahead.
Yeah, I think that's something I just kind of do in life always. Like, I'd rather pay a little bit more and my life be easier and I have the energy and time to do the things I want to do. Obviously, I travel a lot. So when I'm booking flights, it's like, sometimes one flight's like, it's like $100 more, but it's like 4 hours shorter. I'm like, 4 hours is worth $100 to me. So it's like, I'm going to just spend the $100 and then I get those 4 hours of my life back to do what I want to do with them. So I think for me, maximizing my time is so, so important.
Oh my God, you are speaking my language. Like literally, you are 100% speaking my language, because I think as an entrepreneur as well, you start to realize how precious time and energy is. And then you start to actually value that over money. So you're willing to pay for convenience. So for example, and this is kind of outside of business just for a moment, like I actually pay someone to mow my lawn because I've got a big backyard. I could spend 4 hours doing it every 3 weeks, or I could just pay someone to do it for me and I can spend those 4 hours or so, in my business getting stuff done and progressing myself and moving myself forward, rather than putting myself in a situation that I know I'm not going to enjoy. I'm going to be exhausted from it. I'm going to resent doing the task when I could just pay someone, right? And I was even in the movies a few weeks ago with a girlfriend, and we paid to watch this movie that we thought was going to be good in the lead up to Christmas. And we got an hour in, we both looked at each other and we're like, you know what, let's just go. And we actually walked out of the movie rather than spending the extra hour there just sitting through it and, I guess biting our teeth. We were like, let's just go for a shop and have a better time. And you know what, we actually did. We had a way better time because we valued our time, that 1 hour of our life that we weren't going to get back if we stayed watching a movie that we just despised.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little bit about my backstory. So my mom died of cancer 2 years ago. So she was only 53. And I think the whole, all of our lives we're told like, yeah, life's too short. But it wasn't until something happened like that to me that it really put it in like stark perspective, like life is way too fucking short. So I kind of just made the like commitment to myself at that point. Like, I'm not going to do things that make me miserable if I have another option, because like, I don't want to get to 53 and then be like, wow, I spent this whole time not doing things that I enjoy in order to have more money or do what was expected of me or for any other reason. And like you say, if I can pay someone to mow my lawn rather than making myself miserable out there for an hour, I'm absolutely going to just pay them for it. And I think the thing is, when you start kind of like, I call it like upgrading your lifestyle. So when you start upgrading your lifestyle in just those little ways, you don't feel like you have any less money. So for example, one of the things I really like when I fly is to have extra leg room, because I'm like really fidgety. I hate being like in that tiny space. So I started paying for extra leg room, which seems a little bit expensive the first time you do it, but you notice that like it doesn't make a huge impact on your budget overall. So like with you paying for someone to mow your lawn, you don't go, oh man, I wish I had that money right now. Like your money starts to upgrade with the things that you are slowly buying too.
100%. Like raising your standards across the board, raising your standards in life. Yeah, I don't sit there and go, wow, I wish that I had done all those hours mowing my own lawn instead of signing new clients or doing a podcast episode or, doing social media or catching up with friends and family, making the most and like having a better quality of life. I definitely don't sit there and go, I wish I had that couple of hundred back over the past year. So you're 100% right about that. And by the way, I'm sorry to hear about your mum, but it sounds like you've learned a really valuable lesson from that.
Yeah, obviously it's not a situation anyone ever wants to be in, but I have learned so much about, myself and about life and really what is important. And one of the reasons I do what I do is because I want to help other women kind of like go on this journey and have this growth without having to go through a traumatic experience like that. I want women to be able to, you know, up level and focus on themselves and bring themselves joy without having to experience that horrific loss in order to, you know, put it into perspective.
Absolutely. So are you comfortable sharing with us a bit about your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, totally. Let's do it.
Awesome. So tell me, what made you want to be an entrepreneur? When did you start being an entrepreneur? When did you start labeling yourself as an entrepreneur and a life coach? What sort of people do you work with? So yeah, we'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so both of my parents were self-employed growing up. So whenever I've been in like a regular kind of job, I've always felt like there was something missing for me. So I think because they kind of set up that lifestyle as I grew up. So I tried to have like regular jobs and stuff, but I'm also a very like feminine energy person. So that like hard grind hustle just doesn't really align with who I am. I'm like, I
Mm.
don't want to spend 40 hours a week in an office with people that I hate being miserable when, like I said, there is another option. So I tried lots of things when I was younger. You know, I would sew for a little bit and then I'd scream for a little bit. Um, but I've had this like whisper in the back of my head since the first time I remember it was I was 21 and it was like, Rachel, you should be a life coach. But I was like, I'm 21, like no one's gonna listen to a 21-year-old. And I went on like, you know, continuing trying to do the stuff that everyone else does. Um, and then over the past year, I got divorced from my ex-husband, which I know you and I, Olivia, have talked about a lot. I quit my job, sold my house, moved back to England. This is the time. Like I have to whisper in my brain isn't going away. So it's time for me to like, you know, step into that. And especially as a manifestor too, like our job is to initiate and create change. So that was part of me like leaning into my human design and what I'm here to do was starting my own business like that. And yeah, now I've lost my train of thought. Sorry.
That's totally fine. Yeah, so you basically had a lot of change over the last year, and then that's kind of what launched you into becoming a life coach. Is that right?
Yeah. So experiencing all that change and just, again, being in a situation that I was miserable in and just knowing that there was more out there, that there is a better way to live life. So it really started with just personal development for myself. And then all the changes that I made and I implemented in my life to take me from that, like, you know, in a toxic relationship, miserable, like depressed, so unhappy with what I was doing, feeling like just disconnected from my life to
Mm.
the place I'm in now where it's like I feel like I'm so happy like every day and I feel so authentic. And when you are living that like authentic version of yourself, you get this like a magical power to just because you're like so whole in what you're doing. And I was like, I have to share this because the tiny steps you take are really simple, but implementing them every day is the big thing. And I'm like, if I can help other women go from that place that I was at to where I'm at now, just the world in itself is going to be in a much better place.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you paint a picture of where you were at before? So you talked a bit about working for other people and being miserable. What does your life look like now, working for yourself, being your own boss, making your own money?
So one of my other like biggest whys for becoming an entrepreneur was after spending so much time out of the country and in a different country. I really want to now, so I want to be there for her as she gets older. And I have a 3-year-old niece. So one of my big motivations was being able to set my own schedule, which
Mm.
is obviously everyone's favorite thing about entrepreneurship. You know, if my niece has a nativity play, I can just go, or if she has the day off school or she needs looking after, I can just go and do it, you know. Um, so yeah, I work with clients through my Facebook group, on Instagram. So we do just one-to-one sessions on really kind of finding those areas in your life that are causing you to feel inauthentic and disconnected, to decondition the things that we're taught as kids,
Hey,
which quite
Rachel,
often we're not taught. Yep.
sorry to butt in. The internet just keeps dropping out quite a lot, and then it's like
Oh, really?
delaying. Are you in a good spot with good reception?
Yeah, my Wi-Fi says it's full.
Okay, hang on 1 second. Sorry, because I'm only getting like 60% of what you're saying, and I'm like, ah.
Oh,
Hang on, let me just see if I can change mine. I've just got two different networks. Sorry, give me 1 sec. Otherwise, it's just gonna be a complete pain in the ass for my editor.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Hang on. see if this makes a difference. Okay, let's try that again. Sorry, can you just backtrack a little bit? Start from the top with that particular story.
Oh, what was I even saying?
So basically, what is it like being your own boss, making your own money, setting your own schedule, having that sort of freedom?
Okay. Yeah, so one of my personal kind of whys for being an entrepreneur and starting my own business is so I can be present for my family. So after spending quite a few years out of the country, I have my nan is 82 now. I want to be able to be around for her and help her out when she needs it. And I have a 3-year-old niece too, so I really want to be able to, if she has like a show at nursery, I can just go. Or if my sister-in-law is sick, I can just go look after her. So it's really important for me to be able to set my own schedule like that and really be able to work around my real life, because one of the things I hate about like the 40-hour week is you spend so much time doing that to make money that you don't actually get to enjoy your life. And our life is about being here and experiencing it and, enjoying it. And it's really sad if we spend so much time making money that we don't actually get to do that. So yeah, mostly I work with women online, really kind of digging into what areas of their life are making them feel disconnected and inauthentic. And quite often that's just not embodying that like whole version of themselves, because as kids and when we're younger, we're always taught to be kind of like the norm, or like when you're born, your parents are like, oh, she's going to be a doctor or she's going to get married and have 3 kids. And there's very little space created for children to be like what actually makes you happy? Like, what are your passions? Like, what do you want to do? And we're kind of forced into these paths just because that's the norm and that's what society does. And the joy of entrepreneurship is really you get to step into your passions and what makes you whole and what makes you joyful. And when you're working in something that's passionate and that you're passionate about and brings you joy, like even if it's kind of shitty and stressful and you feel like you're working 12 hours a day, like you still get to enjoy it because you're doing what makes you happy.
Yes, I so agree with you. And it's really like a massive mindset shift, because the majority of people, although I'm going to talk about how society is changing now, but we've been kind of conditioned and trained and raised to believe that, working full time, working hard, earning money, and then retiring at 50, 60 plus is the way to go. But the fact of the matter is that society, culture, life is changing, and most people are finding that really hard, really unfulfilling, hard to live a happy life, because you're slaving away at a job, you're exchanging time for money, and then you're actually feeling less happy, right? So for example, today, because I'm part-time now and I'm loving life, it's much better work-life balance. So even this morning I woke up, I was interviewed for another podcast, and then I was able to go out and run some errands. I got my nails done, got a haircut, I did a bit of shopping, and then I watched a movie this afternoon, and then I got ready for this podcast, cooked some dinner, and you know what I mean? I was actually able to integrate both with ease. It didn't have to be all work and then not much of my personal life. I got to be both, which is a much better balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really is the goal for most people in entrepreneurship. But I think that, like you said, it's also a really important mindset shift too, because I think like maybe previously, like you say, we are kind of going through this like magical paradigm shift towards like living a life of joy that also makes you money, rather than make money and then be joyful when you're 65. Make sure that we are like making time for those things in your personal life, because at the end of the day, I say this a lot, that like time's the only thing we ever really have. Everything else in our life is transient. Time is the only thing that you have, and this moment is the only moment that you have to truly enjoy, because we really don't know, like, I know it sounds morbid, but you don't know if you're going to be alive tomorrow. So you have to make sure that if, God forbid, something happened, you get hit by a car or whatever, that you weren't sitting miserable planning for the future that may or may not come. So as long as you go into, I think, your entrepreneurship journey with the idea that I'm going to do this and make money and I'm going to work hard when I have to, but also this is about having a really great like balance in my life to do the things that I enjoy and be present for the people that I want to be present for, but also, get my work done and make my money and things like that.
Yeah, 100%. Like one of the decisions I had to make last year, wait, last year, this year, can't remember now. It's been a while. I had to decide, okay, cool. Like, well, this is when I was working in occupational health. I was working full time and doing overtime. And I was like, okay, I'm on okay money. I am saving a bit. But I was like, you know what would make me really happy? Having an extra day or two up my sleeve, right? And I've got more than that now. So I'm even happier than what I thought I would be. And I had to take a bit of a pay cut, but for me that was totally worth it. And I know that a lot of people wouldn't do that because they're like, it doesn't look like it's a safe option. You know, what if we want to go on a holiday? What if we want to do blah 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 blah? But I'm thinking, I think, to be honest with you, like, I was sick a lot of the time when I was working full time. I took so much sick leave. I think some of it was for mental health days when you're just absolutely exhausted and burnt out. I was taking some because I think I was running my body into the ground. I was burning out working as a full-time shift worker, and I was always in the negative for sick leave. And then I ended up using like annual leave for sick leave because I just get run down with like these non-specific symptoms. So it'd be like a flu one month, then it'd be some sort of cold the next, or something like that. And I was just like, something's got to give. Something's not right. This is my body telling me that I'm not built to be doing life like I am right now. And it's funny because ever since I've gone part-time, I've hardly taken any sick leave.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, like, especially if you're not a generator or a generating like sacral being, like you're not meant to work like that. So projectors, for example, are only meant to work like 2 or 3 hours a day because that's all their body has energy for. And for me, I think a really big thing is like, we're taught, you know, have the 40-hour-a-week job, earn 60 grand a year, buy a house, go on vacation or whatever. But it's like, really digging into what is your version of success, like what does success look like and feel like, you know, and taste like to you. So for a lot of people, that is success, is making the money and buying the nice car and doing this and doing that. But when I really sat down and figured out what success looked like for me, success for me is it's about being chilled, you know, it's about being able to control the energy that I'm in. Like I said, being there for my friends and family. And that doesn't mean I need to earn, you know, 60 grand a year and have 2 weeks vacation. And when you look at it on the big scale, like if you work 60 hours a week and you get to go to Mexico once a year, but you're sick and miserable the rest of the time, like, is it even worth it? Because, you know, when you're in that corporate state anyway, you go on vacation, you spend like the first 3 days, like, yeah, this is great. I'm so excited. Look how amazing this is. Look, we're in Cancun and we're drinking margaritas. And then you spend the next like 7 days, however you long there, going, oh God, I got to go back to work in a week. So you don't even get to enjoy that time you're on vacation because you're worried about going back to work anyway.
100%. Oh my gosh. Yes. I remember when I was doing the 9 to 5 grind, Monday to Friday gig for 2 years, I literally would get the blues every Sunday night. I think it was actually like Saturday was fantastic. I was like, yes, I've got the weekend. It's the weekend. Woohoo. You know, I get to sleep in, do what I want, catch up with friends with brunch and all this. And then Sunday would rock around. I'm like, oh my God, I've got to go to work again tomorrow. And so it would kind of spoil my second day off. And I wasn't able to
Yeah.
relax. I could feel the tenseness in my body. I could feel, you know, the tenseness in my gut. And I was just thinking, oh God, kill me. Do you know what I mean? Because I just knew that I can't explain it. I just knew that I was built for more and that wasn't serving me and I wasn't meant to be doing it. And like
Yeah.
having annual leave for 2 to 4 weeks a year, just, it's not worth it. Like when you think about, you know, as you said, working 40 hours a week or more sometimes and having a bit of extra cash in the bank, but you're not actually able to really use that cash except for that small allotted amount of time a year, it isn't worth it.
Yeah. So when I first started my entrepreneurial journey, obviously you get a lot of opinions from a lot of people. And one of the questions I got all the time is like, when are you going to get a real job? And I was like, this is a real job. Leave me alone. But also I'm like, I would rather be like, you know, poor, but happy and in control of my time for the rest of my life than do that 40-hour-a-week grind and be miserable the whole time. I was like, I'm willing to scale back like what I spend on things in order to have that time freedom and that energy. But the thing is, when you do start doing that and being like, I'm okay with scaling back in order to, you know, have the freedom to create my own business, obviously everything falls into place anyway because you're working with your energy and you're working with something that you're passionate about. And just by kind of trusting the universe and allowing it to put the things in place where it needs to be put in, being like, it's okay, I'm cool, like I'm going to figure this out. You figure stuff out, you know. So I have this conversation with people a lot when they're like, yeah, you know, I'd really like to start my own business, but you know, what if I don't make any money? And what if I lose my house and me and my kids live on the street? And I just kind of ask them like, are you stupid though? Like, are you going to get yourself into a position where you have nowhere to live and you sleep on the streets? Like, no, even if your business doesn't make money initially, you're going to figure out a way to make money to pay your bills, because like, you're not an idiot. Like, have a
Mm.
little bit of trust and faith in yourself that you're not going to let that happen to you.
Yeah. I had my coach tell me that everyone's got like a money threshold, and there's like an intuitive amount that we won't allow ourselves to go under. And so if we know what ours is, we can actually work accordingly to that, right? So, no one's ever going to allow themselves to get to the point where they lose the house and they lose the car and their kids can't eat. Like, you'd obviously intervene at that point. Do you know what I mean? So you pick yourself up off the ground, get another job if you had to, that sort of thing. But I think as well, like, the option of either, whether it be, I think there's 3 options and not just 2, but I think people believe that there's just 2 options. The option that you can either, be rich and be poor in every other way, right? Like, have money in the bank, but be time poor, energy poor, and unhappy
Yeah.
working for someone else if you're built for entrepreneurialism or being a business owner, because not everyone is, as we said at the start of this podcast, and it's okay if you're not. But if you're someone like us who is, that doesn't have to be your only option. And also, being poor yet happy with a better balance of life doesn't have to be the other option either. There is a third option, that you actually build up and you can have wealth in every area, not just one. But
Yeah,
it's about,
absolutely.
yeah. So what are your thoughts on that, Rachel?
I was just going to say, like, even when I say, like, I'd rather be poor and happy, like, even in that situation, like, you're not really poor at that point, because if if you have that time freedom and you're enjoying your life, like, nothing about your life is of lack at that point.
Mm,
So, like, I say that, but it's kind of just like, an inflammatory way of saying it. But I think when you start your entrepreneurial journey, like, I think people are very hard on themselves and they want to make, 10 grand 10 grand a month straight away. And if you do, that's amazing, but the reality of most businesses is it does take time to build, and that the majority of entrepreneurs have some sort of like part-time job or side job just to make sure that you have that income coming in that you need, but that you still allow yourself enough time to build your business. So if you are like brand new and starting out, like, you're not a failure if you do have a side job or if you have a part-time job. Like, you're smart, you're doing what you need to do in order to continue living your life in order for you to build your business. Like, it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like, there is this kind of crossover phase that a lot of people go through.
Thank you for saying that, because I feel like, and this is the other reason why I've launched my business in this particular area, right, is because I think the stats are that more than half the population, in Western society have got side hustles and they've got other streams of income. And so people are realizing and awakening to the fact that, hey, this 40-hour working week actually isn't working for me. It's working against me. I don't like work. I don't like living like this. I'm not a happy person doing this. And so people are looking elsewhere and they're looking for different options for different incomes and diversifying their income as well. And so, there's like this really weird, and I don't know where it comes from, but there's like this really weird presumption that it's like, okay, you've started a business, so you must be successful overnight. But it's like, it actually takes time to build up clients and customers and repeat business and referrals and building trust and all that sort of stuff. And there's actually no shame or guilt, and you shouldn't even be embarrassed if you are working part-time to make that happen. Like, if you think about Hollywood and all the different actors and actresses that are over there trying to make the big time, most of them are working in bars or doing temp work or whatever it is to cover their expenses while they build their dream on the side. And there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, I think it's actually a really good thing, and you're doing it a really smart way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things, like, it's better for, and I think, again, it's this idea that we're sold that this is how you be successful. You have your 40-hour work week, or you have a successful business, right? But you can't just hop from one to the other, because it just doesn't exist. Like, if a stranger comes up to you in a street and tries to sell you a new product, you're going to be like, I have no idea who you are, get away from me. Like, you need to build up that audience and that connection with people and build up that trust in whatever way it is, and that doesn't happen overnight. And I just always think, like, it's better to be moving in the direction of your dreams and doing something that society deems like not a successful life, like, like working in a bar on the side or serving or doing casual work, whatever you have to do, than be in your 40-hour-a-week job making no kind of like effort towards your dream at all.
Mm. 100%. And, you know, I can relate to that. Like, if anyone that is listening to this is working even full time in their, you know, traditional day job, and they're trying to run a business on the side, I so get where you're at, because that is hard yakka. Like, that's taking a lot of energy, because you're swinging from one energy of being in your full-time job and then swinging all the other way to a different type of creative energy. And it can take up, yeah, a lot of your energy. So this is why it's so valuable learning about like the generators and the manifestors and the projectors and this sort of thing. I'm still trying to figure out what I am. But yeah, like leveraging that and using that to your advantage as well, which is super
Yeah,
helpful.
definitely. And I think the whole thing with like creative businesses and when you're serving other people and the kind of thing that we do is it does take a lot of creative energy, and creative energy kind of needs this space to manifest too. So like if you're working 40 hours a week and running your like creative side business, like I think that's just like the most magical thing, because I personally with my energy, I can't do that. Like I need that space for my creation and my ideas to kind of grow. And I could
Mhm.
never find that like while I was working full time. So for me, I was like, I've got to go and I've got to do this, because I knew my energy wouldn't allow me to do that wholly and fully in the way that I wanted to.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
No, I get that. I struggled with it big time. Like, I had a really strong, passionate why behind what I was doing. So it made it a bit easier. But it made it harder to sustain as well, because it was like most of my time and focus and energy was going towards, as I said, my day job that had requirements outside of me being in that building too. And then actually having like, you know, running calls after work and then fitting in this, that, and the other. And creating actually takes a lot of energy. Like, the energy to create something is totally different to the energy of just carrying out a task, or, you know, doing a job that's very task orientated or based. And so for me now, like working part-time, it definitely allows more downloads and drop-ins and inspiration and, you know, space to actually create. And that's one of the things that I love about working part-time, is because it's a much better balance for me, and for me to actually manifest things in a different kind of way. So I find that super helpful. Um,
Yeah, definitely. So like that creative energy is a very different energy than
mm,
like you say, like if you have a job just going through the motions is almost like a muscle memory type of thing. Whereas when you are creative, it's kind of it's taking sorry. It's like taking a piece of who you are and like, you know, pouring it out there. And that takes just like a whole other level of energy too.
yeah, completely agree. Because like I remember when I was working as an occupational health nurse, I could pump out like 8 appointments a day, literally in and out, in and out, in and out, over and over and over. It was very monotonous, very boring and repetitive, and exhausting in its own way. But then when I'm in my creative flow as a coach, I can only really do 3 coaching calls a day. Any more than that, and it's way too much energy, because it's not just a task. Like, you've got to be fully present for that person. You've got to understand their map of the world. You're also thinking about what's going to help move them forward. You've got to be, you know, actively listening the whole time. And so that takes a whole different level of energy and presence, as opposed to just running a repetitive sort of medical over and over just on a different person. And so, you know, I remember I actually had to cap myself at having no more than 3. And that included like, you know, even like a podcast episode, because by the time it took to actually set up, do the recording, you know, being there energetically, and then coming off that high after the coaching call or the podcast episode, it's like, okay, cool. So it's meal time or a snack time, or, you know, wet your lips with some water, and then you're back into it again, and you've got to get into a whole new mind frame for the next person. And so that can take up more time and energy as well. But if you find it fulfilling, it doesn't really drain your energy that crazy much, but it's hard to explain. It's just like a different kind of energy that you bring to the table.
Yeah, definitely. It's rather than like when you get home from work and you're like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. Like that was miserable, you know, whereas like when you're working with clients, because when you do an interview like this, or if you're working with a one-on-one client, like you have to be like fully present, right? So everything about you has to be there. You have to be there like wholly and energetically in order for it to work. So you come out of it with a different sort of, it's like an exhaustion, but oh my God, that was so cool, you know? So it's
Mm.
like, it's a different sort of like use of your energy, but you still, like you say, you can't be fully present and fully like intuitive and fully there for a person if you're doing 6 calls a day, because you just don't have that much energy available to you like emotionally.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember when I was booking too many coaching calls in one day or doing too many podcast episodes and just like switching from one thing to the other and struggling to keep up, it was like I had to kind of realize, okay, cool, it's okay if you can't be productive. Like, because I kind of thought if I can pump out 8 medicals and I can pump out 8 coaching calls, and it's just not the way. And then because I was overbooking myself, I'd be like exhausted in between my calls, and then I'd have this high ready for the call. And then after the call, I'd be like on a high because it was just like so aligned and we we're so on the same page. And this person had this shift or this breakthrough, and it just, the endorphins were just magical. And
Yeah,
then
I
that
think
also is energy, and that you're coming off as well. So there was a moment there in my business where I was like, am I meant to be doing this? I'm kind of dreading the next phone call or the next coaching session, blah, 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 blah. But it actually wasn't even about that, because I was like, am I meant to be a coach? Why am I feeling this way? And you know what? It was actually a signal to me saying, you know what, Olivia, you're overbooking yourself, you're overextending yourself. And by doing that, you're not actually showing up the best way that you can for your clients. So you've got to rein it in.
Yeah, definitely. I think a big part of like an entrepreneurial journey too, especially when you're in a business of serving, is learning to ride that wave. Because like you said, you do have those like real highs, especially when clients are like crushing it and getting so much stuff done, and you're so proud of them and you're like high with them, and it's like, oh my God, you're amazing. Like you're doing so well. And then you do have to like, we all have that emotional energy. You have to ride kind of that wave back down until you come back to that neutral, so you can do it again. And if you have back-to-back calls, you're not going to be able to ride that wave efficiently. And even as you're like building your business, there's going to be days that are like amazing and you do so well, and other days that you're kind of like you said, like, am I even meant to be able to do this? And you really have to learn your like kind of coping strategies to ride that wave, and enjoy the highs when they're there, but also not let the lows get you down, and just wait
Mm,
till you come back to that like neutral standpoint, that
yeah.
neutral level, in order to take the next steps in whatever you want to do.
Yes, I so agree. So, Rachel, how long have you been an entrepreneur for? And do you feel like having parents that were, self-employed, do you feel like that helped you with your success so far?
I mean, I think it really set me up just for the lifestyle, because they always had a lot of freedom. Like we would take vacation whenever my parents wanted to. They would just be able to, like I say, take the day off if I had a show or something. So I think having that set up as I grew up kind of left me no other option. Like I saw them with that freedom and I wanted it. I didn't really know how to do it any other way.
Mm,
So I started my business about 6 months ago. So I've been full time in it for about 6 months now. Um, and yeah, I can't imagine my life any other way. So really, I'm like, this is what I was meant to do. This is the way I'm meant to live my life. Um, so yeah, I can't imagine it any other way.
I love that. That is so awesome. And congratulations on being full time. That must be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it is. It is the best feeling in the world. And I know we talked about this a little bit the other day, but what I love about this space of like serving and creating together in this shifting paradigm where women are stepping more into the entrepreneurial world is there is like space and abundance for everyone. And we really there is space in the universe for everyone to be abundant doing something that they love. And that's what I think is so cool about it.
Yeah, me too. And this is actually a really good segue into, so you and I have talked about in our messages about narcissism in business. So tell me what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So I think when you look at like the regular kind of business setup and the people who are successful, what we see quite a lot is like narcissistic men. So one of the real like abundance blocks for me stepping into my business was that's what I saw as people who made money were. They were like these narcissistic, like unkind, very selfish men. And I was like, I don't want to be any sort of that. I don't want to be that person, and that's the story we're told. Like when you see successful salesmen or like successful in quotation marks, obviously like CEOs, they have those sort of narcissistic, I only care about myself tendencies. So really working through that block for me was really important in unlocking my like streams of abundance, and saying that like you don't have to be those things to make money. Like the people who make money in serving other women like we do are kind and caring and very much in their feminine energy. And like I said, my favorite thing about women working entrepreneurial on entrepreneurial journeys is that It's about that word just really
It's a
gets
tricky
me.
word. It's hard to spell.
I was going to say spelling it is impossible.
I know. Thank God for auto correction.
Yeah. So women on this entrepreneurial journey is very much about the betterment of the collective, especially business coaches like you, or you're like, hey, like, this is what I did to have this freedom and have this abundance, and like, you can have it too. And that's just such an amazing mindset to be in. And with me, it's like, this is all the healing that I've found, and I want you to have it. It's about sharing all these like things that we've learned about ourselves, and this shifting paradigm into do this and make money for me, to let's all do this and all make money for ourselves and live these wonderful magical lives.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. And I loved it when you talked about that in our messages together, because I think like very similarly. So, what I perceive things as being is like years and years and years ago, like backtrack maybe even a couple of decades, right? It was like there was this, and even in like the 90s movies too, you've got like, a lot of the success on those sort of movies look like they were that middle-aged male who was a CEO in a business suit, making lots of money, stepping on other people, very much in their masculine, like all that sort of narcissistic sort of stuff. And I think like back then, even when it came to like when we think about network marketing now, Australia is actually still quite behind the 8 ball in regards to that. A lot of people think that network marketing or direct selling is like a pyramid scheme, but it's actually not, which I'll address on a different podcast, by the way. But I think like back then, there was definitely a lot of cases where people were taken advantage of and told one thing and something else happened, and then they were like scammed or money was taken from them. And that person that was the scammer, they ended up being like better off, but the person who was the victim wasn't. And so people have wisened up to that, and they're a lot more careful about these sort of things. And so like to make money these days and to be successful, it really is all about the value that you bring. You can't just scam people anymore and expect to get away with it, right? There's repercussions, there's consequences, you get a bad name, a bad reputation, you've got the internet, it goes viral. Like there's no way that you can get away with that crap anymore. So now people are like, wow, okay, we've really got to offer a lot of value, because they're once again, like I come from the abundance mindset as well, but the internet's noisy. There's, a greater population in our society these days. There's more and more people moving into entrepreneurship and business owning and all this sort of stuff. And I think it's fantastic and I think it's wonderful. However, I think the whole mindset of like, I'm going to scam or take advantage of someone to get rich and rob a bank, it's kind of like totally different now. It's like, what's the most genuine, authentic value that I can give someone? And when I can feel that someone's giving me that from a space of caring and not kind of like what's in it for them, if I feel that, I'm more likely to trust them and I'm more likely to want to buy from them and invest in myself through them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, that whole shifting paradigm is to like that understanding and that like inspirational piece. Is like, we don't just want to go and just like buy something because we think we're going to make money. Like we want to make an impact. We want to change people's lives. And I know a lot of like really wonderful women who work in like network marketing. But I don't think these days it's not about, like you say, it used to be like get rich quick schemes, but these days it's like people who work in those situations have found something that they're genuinely passionate about, whether it's a product or whether it's a service. And they're like, this, again, they're like, this is how this thing has changed my life, and I want it to change your life too.
Yeah, I agree. When you come from the space of like wanting to share, do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, I kind of liken it back to when you when you like fall in love, right? And it's, you want to scream it from the mountaintops, you want other people to be as happy as what you are, you want to share that love sort of thing. And that's how I kind of feel about this particular topic, right? So when you realize that there's a better way to live, or there's a different way to live that's going to serve you better, you want to be able to share that with people. You want to be able to enlighten them, because as I said, the majority of people are trained to live their life like robots, right? Go to school, finish year 12, go to uni or TAFE, get your qualification, do this, do that, get into debt, get lots of loans, like that sort of thing. And it's simply just not the case these days. We have so much more opportunity available to us in this digital age. And so there are different ways to make money, and there are different ways to make a living. And, if you can do that and then also have impact in a positive way, it's extremely fulfilling. And then you feel like you've got the best of both worlds. Because I liken it to this, right? I think there's probably nothing more, well, there is more, things more tragic than this, but in a business sense, it's like, okay, cool. So just say you reach your, just say you've got like a money goal of like making 5 million or something, right? So just say you make that 5 million, you've worked your ass off for it perhaps, or you've manifested it or whatever. It's taken you a bit of time, a few years to get to. When you get to the end of that and then you're completely unfulfilled by it, that to me is like the biggest, saddest, like I would feel like such a failure, because it's like, ugh, it's just money. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? Like, but if I can get to my goal and feel fulfilled by something else other than just money, that to me means that I've won. That's my idea of success. That's what would fulfill me. That's just me
Yeah,
personally.
absolutely. And I think that's part of shifting from that like masculine energy version of business to the more like feminine energy version of business. So I'm very much of the mindset like I'd rather take longer to get to that goal, whatever it is, but enjoy the journey and be sharing it and feel fulfilled every day in what I'm doing, than get there really quick and go, well, this goal isn't as great as I thought it would be. Whereas if you're enjoying every day and you're making an impact and you're finding joy in what you're doing, even if it takes longer, you don't really care, because you're so like in your power and in your passion every day, that the goal isn't like, obviously it's a goal that you'd like to get, but it's not like the end game. The end game is changing lives and making an impact. And the way I kind of look at it is like, I have found all this healing and all this knowledge, and I feel as a manifester, it's definitely part of my design to share these things, and that it would be a tragedy if I didn't. Like, what if I had all this healing and all this knowledge and I get to live in this like magical, wonderful space I've created? And what a like mess it would be if I didn't share that with other people.
I agree. I really do. I hear what you're saying. And it kind of takes me back and it reminds me back to my early days in business when I did sign up to a network marketing company, and I was doing pretty well. Like I ranked up a bit, I was ordering about $1,000 worth of products every month and selling all of that. So what I was buying, I was replacing with income. And this was on the side of my full-time job, by the way. So I was not only selling online, but I was doing, in-house parties and demos. I was at markets, like I was doing the whole shebang. And I think my main driving factor was actually like I wanted to be at the top, right? So my driving factor was wanting to be what we call a crown princess, which is the highest ranking of that company, where you've got like $1 million team under you and you're like living the life, you're getting all the rewards, all the incentives from the company, going overseas, all this sort of stuff, right? I saw people doing that, like people that I know, and I was like, oh my God, I want that. And I was just spinning my wheels. But at the end of the day, like I realized after a good, I think it was about a year that I was doing it, it was like I was so unfulfilled by that. Even though the makeup products and the skincare was phenomenal and it was, premium, beautiful stuff. Um, After a while, I started to realize, okay, I started asking myself, why am I doing these markets? Why am I doing these parties? Why am I selling these products? Yeah, sure, I love them, but like, am I really fulfilled? Like, if I didn't get paid to do this, would I still want to do it? And the answer was no. And I had to be really honest and real with myself, because I was like, okay, great. I could get to Crown Princess one day. I could get to Crown Princess next month or in a year or in 10 years. But if I'm not smelling the roses along the way and enjoying the journey, like the whole process is pointless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that end goal is like, as much as we're like, we want to do it for ourselves, I think it's a lot of like, when I'm the crown princess, I will, that will validate what I'm doing to everyone around me, and I
Oh,
think
yeah.
end goals are a lot about like, oh, I made £1 million this year in my business. Look, everyone, look, I'm a success. Whereas enjoying the journey is about finding that internal success and what success feels like to you, and stepping away from that like validation from other people, which I think is definitely the hardest thing to do, because people have, they're so nosy and they're always in your business and they want to know what you're doing and how much money you're making, when it really like that isn't what makes you successful. You can have all the things that they want you to have and not be successful at the end of it. Like you said, you were making good money, you were up ranking, but it wasn't fulfilling. So it's so important when you're on your entrepreneurial journey to try and separate yourself from other people's views on your business, because I definitely feel like, as a woman in the service sector, like I could be making £4 billion every month and it still wouldn't satisfy a lot of people with a traditional mindset. I still wouldn't have a real job to them. I still wouldn't, be doing the right things. Even if I was making 10 times what they're making, it still wouldn't fulfill those like societal specifications for success. So by really stepping away from what other people view as success, you can really tune into what success looks like for you, and really kind of chase those passions that bring those things to you so you can enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I so get that. Like for me, right, so like a lot of my life I was like always wanted to be a nurse midwife, got those degrees, stood there on my graduation day with the cap on, the gown on. I was like, meh. Do you know what I mean? Like I was like, cool, I did
Yeah.
it. And I was like trying to make myself proud of the fact that I put myself through like 6 years of uni and thousands worth of dollars of HECS debt. And I just stood there and I was like, why do I not feel happy? I was like, why do I not feel more fulfilled? And I just couldn't work it out. And it's because I think at the time I hadn't worked out what success looked like for me. I knew that by society's standards, I looked like I had success because at the time I, had done all the right things, finish year 12, get into uni, get my degrees. I was in a long-term relationship, which looked good on the outside, but it actually wasn't on the inside.
Yeah.
And then for me, it was, once again, being attached to the outcome of like, even back then I was like, if I get married, then I'll look successful and I'll prove to myself that I'm successful and I'm loved and blah, 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 blah. But the actual relationship itself was kind of crap. Do you know what I mean? And so was my idea of success. And so when I had to step back and look at other people and go, well, what makes them happy? What makes them fulfilled? That helped me kind of realize, oh, okay, cool. So societal's expectations of what's supposed to make me feel happy and fulfilled isn't necessarily the truth, or my truth at least. Did you feel that too, Rachel?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it does take you until you get like a little bit older to figure out those things. My hope kind of is for the next generation that we get to teach them that we get to teach them from kids, like, you get to decide what you do with your life. You get to decide what success looks like, and not kind of funnel them into this life that they probably don't need. And I think just finding that internal validation is really important. But I just wanted to say too, like, I feel like we are always in the like mentality of creating our lives, no matter what it is, right? And I think it's something to really bear in mind, especially on your entrepreneurial journey, is it's okay to get what you wanted and then figure out that that isn't what you want. So it's like I've been in situations, where like I wanted to get married and I wanted to have my job as a teacher, and I got those things and I was like, this doesn't make me happy. And that space is okay too. I think a lot of people get to that position where they have everything that they wanted and they're still not happy, and they feel guilty about it not making them happy. But like, that's totally okay to be in that space, but you're then in a position where you have to pivot and do something else and find out what it is going to make you happy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people get to that point and they're like, what's wrong with me? They start to have all these doubts, like there's something wrong with them. But in actual fact, there's something wrong with the system, with what we've been taught. Like even the fact that, so my mum's generation, when she was younger and her, I think she was 18 at the time or something, a lot of families back then were saying, get into admin, being a secretary is what's going to make you successful. And that was the big thing back then, and now that's actually not, like, that's just a regular job these days. Do you know what I mean? Like, they could be just making, minimum wage. Like, that doesn't mean that they're actually going to be successful. And also getting degrees through uni doesn't make you successful either necessarily, because these days nearly every man and his dog has got a degree. So it doesn't really set you apart that much. But when you Google, some of the most successful people that have left and are still leaving amazing legacies, a lot of them are high school dropouts. A lot of them are corporate dropouts or university dropouts, never actually finished a degree, never got into uni, and they've been very successful, in the monetary sense, because we can't talk about, necessarily their levels of fulfillment because we don't know. But degrees doesn't always mean success.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely one of those people, like, I was very naturally academic. School just came very easily to me. And I didn't go to uni straight after school because I didn't want to go, so I went backpacking and I went traveling, and my mom and I ran a business for a while. But it got to the point in my life that I was like, in order for me to have the base standard that everyone else has, I have to get a degree, not because I want one or because it's going to set me up for a career, but because everyone else has one. And I hate that we're in this situation where like young people are getting themselves into what I have like £55,000 worth of student loan debt to get a degree that doesn't set me apart anymore. It just makes me the same as everyone else. So I really hope that like as we move forward and as this paradigm shifts, the people go to uni that genuinely want to be there, that need to be there, like the doctors and the scientists and the researchers of the world that really need this academic foundation, and the rest of us can go about and, you know, do what we're good at and live in our passions and not have to get ourselves in that much debt in order to be the same as everyone else.
I agree. And even having like a coaching business online really isn't that expensive. Like when you think about it, it's not like you're opening a store with, you know, products inside and hiring staff and all that sort of stuff. And if you want to do that, that's cool. But like when you think about running a business online, it's actually quite cheap. You have got no major overheads. You've just got to pay for some like software stuff. So like all I pay for in my business is basically like my podcast manager, my booking system online, just basic stuff like that, right? I haven't had to fork out like a massive loan or anything and actually purchase a building or a space or anything. Like, oh, I paid for my microphone that I'm using right now and my laptop, but I already had my laptop, you know, I'd already had my phone. And so that's one of the beautiful things too. And like, yeah, when you talk about other, you know, vocations and professions, you know, of course, if you want to be a surgeon, you need to go to uni for that. Like there's certain things that you have to go and learn to do and specialize in. But you know, not everyone has to do that if that's not the right career path for them. And also if you're a creative person, like that's actually okay. And I think like as I'm getting older, I'm realizing, and I'm not old by the way, I'm only 29, but as I do progress through life, I'm like, I'm actually a really creative person. Like I love being in that creative flow. That's one of the best moods and one of the best states that I can be in. And I really genuinely like love that feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the big blocks for me, obviously, I love to write. I write my blog. I just love to write. You know, that's how my creativity kind of flows through me. But it's one of those things we take on other people's opinions of us. So, like in school, I was told that I wasn't very good at writing. You know, that like, you know, my essays were very basic or whatever. So I lived in this idea that I'm just not a very good writer. You know, I traveled when I was younger, and everyone was like, "Oh, you know, you should write a blog about it." And I was like, "Yeah, you know, I'm not a very good writer." And then one day when I
Mm.
sat down and started writing and I was like, I'm actually a really great writer. Like I'm really great at telling my stories. I'm really great at telling them in a way that other people can relate to. I'm really great at telling stories that maybe other people might not have the right words to tell. And once I started telling myself that new story that like, actually, I'm a really great writer, I could really step into that version of me who, you know, writes and shares these stories and connects with people and helps people make these changes. But while I was living in that like other version of me, there was no way that I could have done that.
I love that, Rachel. Thank you so much for sharing, because I actually relate, like the fact that you were told that you weren't a great writer, you subconsciously took that on and you were living in that truth when it actually didn't have to be your truth. Like I relate to that because I can't remember exactly where along the line it was, but I was told by someone, or maybe I told myself this, that I wasn't a good speaker and that I had a funny voice. And so I always was a great writer, right? Like I could write out my feelings, I could write emails and I could write, you know, blog posts and all this sort of stuff. But whenever it came to speaking, I felt like I fumbled my way through it. I felt very uncomfortable hearing my voice back. I didn't like it. And here I am with a podcast, right? Because I had to change my story. And when I, you know, looked at other people that had voices that, you know, probably weren't very conventional, like even Tony Robbins, he's loud, it's abrasive, you know, like it's very unique. Like that doesn't stop him from speaking to millions of people around the world. He's just thankful that he can even speak because he's got like this vocal cord problem now that he's going to lose his voice one day. And so it's really powerful what you take on from other people because it's not necessarily true. It's just their perception.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the questions I ask my clients a lot is like, what lies are you telling yourself and believing? Like, what lies do you tell yourself every day that you're allowing to really shape your reality? Whether it's that you're not a good writer or you're not confident or that you'll never be able to have that, like all of these things we tell ourselves about our lives really are just a matter of mindset, you know? And it's like once we step out of those lies and are like, wait, there is another option, and start believing that, that's really when our lives start to like change in front of us. So when you say, no, actually, like I can be a confident person, or I can be a confident speaker, or I can have what other people have,
Mm.
that's when you allow yourself to kind of step into, you know, a better version of you and have those better things and do those better things purely because you just changed an idea that you've been lying to yourself your whole life about.
Yeah, I agree. Because like I really love the idea too that you can reinvent yourself whenever you want. And I think for me anyway, when I went through high school and I came out of high school, I was so used to being like in a certain mold of myself and being perceived a certain way. And I was like comfortable, but also uncomfortable with being that sort of person. And then in my 20s, it was like, wow. And by the way, I moved into state, so I didn't feel like I had to stay that person.
Hmm.
And so I had the beauty of like rediscovering who I was. Like, this is the great thing about life, is that you get to do this multiple times. And I've even done it after my toxic relationships, which I've talked about in the past. And it's like, so I remember back at school, there was a guy called Simon who used to tease me all the time, but I was never really bullied, right? So I don't want to play that card. I definitely wasn't bullied, but he would always call me oblivious. So instead of Olivia, he'd call me oblivious. And back then, to be honest with you, I kind of was. I wasn't very aware, right, of other people, of behavior. And I think that's why I found like psychology so fascinating in school, because it was like, you know, I just wasn't grown up to be very socially aware, I suppose. And so, you know, ever since high school, I've always been fascinated with humans, their behavior, why we do things, what drives us, what motivates us. And now, you know, 10 plus years later, it's like one of my strengths is actually emotional intelligence now, or social intelligence, which, you know, was the complete opposite back when I was in high school and middle school.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like there's this kind of idea in society sometimes that change is bad, and like, oh, you're not who you used to be, or like you're not what I remember you to be, but not in a way that like that's totally okay. And I felt the same like in high school, like I was popular and I had lots of friends and I was never bullied or anything, but I never really felt my truest self because I didn't know how to be that person. I was being the person I thought everyone else wanted. So I would backpack a lot and go traveling, and I'd generally always go by myself, because I found that freedom there. Like you said, like nobody knew who I was, like when you moved into state. So like came up with the saying to myself, like, there's no yesterdays on the road, which meant I could be a new person every day. And for me, that was so freeing and really allowed me to find myself outside of other people's perceptions of you, because people expect you to be the same as you were last week, regardless of whether that person made you happy or not. So to really change and shift who you are while surrounded by the same people is really difficult, because people do have opinions on you and opinions on what you're doing. But this is something I just want to say quickly, like, when obviously, even if you start your own business too, like people will judge you and people will give you their opinions, but what they're often doing is they're doing it out of love, because they're trying to protect you. They don't want you to fail, they don't want you to get hurt, they don't want you to maybe like make less money than you wanted to. But they don't realize that by telling you those things and saying those things to you, they're really limiting who you are and what you want to be. But they are doing it out of love, like they're trying to love you and keep you safe, and they don't realize like how damaging that is to you and the life you're trying to live.
God, yeah. Like, if I think back to even like high school, some people would be like, yeah, right, she's a life coach. Do you know what I mean? But I'm a completely different person now than what I used to be years and years and years and years ago, even 3 years ago. And this is one of the things that I talk about in my first podcast for the Renewed podcast, is like giving yourself the permission to evolve and develop and grow and not being held back anymore. And that's one of the beautiful things of getting older, is like having that freedom to change. So like even you being on the road, like you literally could step into a different version of yourself every day if you wanted, or try on a different persona and see what felt right to you, or actually create the kind of, person that future Rachel wanted to be. And when it comes to clients and, we're dealing with confidence issues and stepping out in their business and all this sort of stuff, it's about the be, do, have model. So like become that best version of you. What does that look like? Let's try that on. How does that feel? It's kind of like putting on an item of clothing and seeing how that feels on you. Like, do you like that? Does it feel aligned? Intuitively, does this feel good? And so we can do that for the rest of our lives. And if we bring it back to business and entrepreneurship, I think the more and more that we step into ourselves, and this is one of the great things about having a personal brand and an online presence and sharing yourself with the world, it's like, there's nothing more beautiful, I think, than being able to step into the real you and really showing who you are, and not just like one version of Rachel or one version of Olivia, but being like, this is me and I get to make money being me. Like, how great is that? It's so fun, and the people that I look up to and, not aspire to be, but, admire, they're people that are really stepped more and more into themselves, regardless if other people like it or not, because they like who they are and that's attractive.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, once you really step into who you are, like this is what I found anyway, because I have quite a few friends now that I was friends with in high school. And when you start to change and like step into who you are a little bit more, like you're worried about what these people are going to say or what they're going to do. And obviously, people love people who are authentic, you know, because everybody wants to be the most whole version of themselves. And by being with people who are being authentic, all that does is inspire you to live more in your like wholeness. And all of the people I was worried about have just like totally accepted who I am, because this is who I am, you know, like who I was before was kind of just like me with like a funny costume on, whereas me now is like me wholly, and all those people are still around, and anyone that, you know, didn't really agree or enjoy the new version of me isn't around anymore, and they're just people that aren't meant to be in my life, and that's totally okay. um and I think one of the most powerful moments for me in starting my business was when I started, when people were asking like, what do you do, was started saying, you know, I'm a life coach. Because, you know, I don't know if you've been there, but when you first start your business, you go through this like bit where you're kind of like worried to tell people, and you're like, yeah, well, I kind of do this thing, but yeah. And when I first started being like confidently like, yeah, I'm a life coach, and people were like, oh, that's so cool, you know, because we build these stories in our heads that people are going to go, what's a life coach, like how are you qualified to do that? But really, people just want you to be happy and be in your power, and they're like, oh, that's awesome, like tell me more. But that was a
Yeah, I
really
definitely
big
went
deal
through
for
that.
me.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I went through the same thing too. I'm like, yeah, when you're like, when they say, what do you do? And then I'm like, because I'm part-time midwife nurse, I'm like, do I say I'm a nurse and midwife, or do I say I'm a coach? And you know what, like I say both sometimes depending on who I'm talking to. But you know, when I first said I was a life coach, even I didn't sound confident saying that, so they didn't feel confident hearing it. Whereas now that, you know, once I really stepped into that version of Olivia, and I was like, yes, I'm a life coach and I'm certain about this and this is who I am now, and it's part of my identity and it's what I do, it's like the other person received it with so much more ease and was like really curious about it. So they're like, tell me more, you know, that's really interesting, because it's not something that, it's not the mainstream like career or business choice, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially because mostly it's for men with me, they're like, what is that? You know, like they're fascinated by the idea that there is more to life than they already know, you know. So like I have some really great conversations. So I work in a bar part-time too. Um, Mostly because like, you know, when you work from home and you're by yourself, and I just like sit at home with my dogs and I'm like, I'm gonna go crazy. So
Yeah,
I
you
like to
need
work in the
social
bar, and
stuff.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, oh, look at all these like real life people. This is so fun. And that's also where I have some of my like best conversations, because especially with men, they're like, whoa, like what is that? And you get to talk about it, and it's so cool just to kind of open them up to the idea like life can be different once you unlock those different versions of yourself in your brain.
Yeah, in fact, I love talking to those sort of people that are doing something a bit that's like a bit sidestepped from the normal average mainstream way of life. Like back in the day, I used to think they were just weird, but the people that are like really creative types doing something a bit different, like even when Google came out and you would hear about like how people would work at Google and have afternoon naps and all this sort of stuff, I'm like, oh my God, tell me more. Do you know what I mean? Because I just didn't want to be stuck in the same old average, boring, like pathway in life. I was like, once I started opening up myself and opening up my eyes, and I started to kind of really, I guess, you know, work on myself and do personal development, that's when I was more accepting of other people. So it's funny because the more accepting I became of me, the more accepting I became of other people, and the more I wanted to know about other people and a different way of living life and a different way of, you know, earning money and all this sort of stuff. Like those sort of people fascinated me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that thing that I'm not sure if it's a human design thing or just a thing in general, but like the way you interact with the world is just a reflection of like your internal state. And I know that from like my personal life, like I was when I was younger, I was very judgmental and like almost unkind, like outwardly. But that was exactly how I was treating myself too. Like that was merely a reflection of like my internal state with who I was. And
Yeah.
when I was going around like judging other people and having opinions on everything everyone else was doing, that was only a reflection of how I was treating myself too. So you're right, like when you step into that whole version of yourself, and being an entrepreneur and being very authentic, you have to accept every part of yourself and every thought that you have and everything that you're going through. And then obviously externally, you do that for other people too. So no matter what feelings they're feeling, you find yourself finding a lot more empathy. Whereas before you would have been like, shut up, get over it. Whereas now you're like, okay, cool. Like, tell me more. Like, how is that interacting with your life? Like, how is that changing? Like, what can you do to fix that? And the same with other people's businesses too. You're like, wow, that's so cool. Like, I want to know more about what you're doing. Because once you shift the way you interact with yourself and you want to be more inquisitive and find out all of those areas of you and really dig deep into, you know, the fun, fluffy unicorn stuff, but also like the scary stuff too that you've not been wanting to deal with, you want to do that with other people too. So everybody gets to live this more authentic life when we are authentic in ourselves, because we become so just accepting generally.
And it's so right when you talk about how the external world is like a reflection of our internal world. That's a big takeaway I have learned this year. Like, I'd heard it before and I'm like, yeah, but I hadn't actually really seen how it plays out. And it's even funny because with your clients, so when they come to you with something, it's actually reflecting something that's going on with you, right? So not just that, but everything, like whenever you're triggered by something, it's actually not that person's fault or whatever. It's actually like, okay, so why is this triggering me? What is it about me
Yeah.
in my life that, you know, I haven't dealt with that's making me project some sort of issue onto that person? And a classic one actually was like, this is a really good one actually. So I saw Sarah Jessica Parker in Sydney this year. Sorry, but well, by the time this gets out, this will be 2020. So last year in
So last year.
2019. Yeah. So I saw Sarah Jessica Parker. She's been a huge idol of mine ever since I fell in love with Sex and the City. And I had this certain perception of her because she would play a similar sort of role in different movies and all this sort of stuff, right? So I got there on the day. I went to this event called Business Chicks. There was like hundreds of women filtered into this massive stadium of a room, and we're having this bubbly, you know, champagne breakfast, and it was just absolutely like gorgeous. And I kind of envisioned Sarah Jessica Parker to be a certain way, and she was just completely different than what I thought. And the people that interviewed her were a little bit fumbly. They didn't seem that experienced. And so just Sarah Jessica Parker's answers were a little bit vague and not what I was expecting. And I came away and my business coach was like, how was it? Like, I know you were looking forward to it. I wish I could have gone, you know, tell me all about it. And I was like, I'm actually a little bit disappointed. And she's like, why? And I'm like, well, you know, she's just not what I was expecting or hoping for, right? And what it came down to was the fact that I didn't perceive her to be the way that I was expecting. I was expecting her to be perfect in such and such of a way. And then my coach is like, well, that's actually your problem. And I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean? I'm like, how dare you say that? You know, and she's like, no, not in a bad way, but it's like on some level, you're expecting yourself to be perfect with something that you want to do. And when I sat there and I was really honest with myself, I was like, holy crap, she's so right. Because I thought I had to be this perfect life coach person who had all my shit together in every single way 100% of the time, and I could never have a bad day or a bad mood or anything like that, and I just assumed I had to be perfect. And you know, I was looking at this iconic woman globally and she wasn't perfect, and that's okay because she's a human. You know, that doesn't mean that she can't be successful and can't be well liked and blah 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 blah. And it was actually a really freeing lesson for me by going to
Yeah,
that event.
definitely.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like that's a really hard lesson to learn and kind of internalize, that everything that happens to me in my life reflects on me somehow. So I think it's really hard to first accept that about you, like yourself and your experience, and that, you know, if people piss you off, like it says a lot about you as well, like as much as it does about them. And just really by changing your mindset to saying like, okay, like this triggered me. What about myself and my internal state is this triggering? And just that change of mindset takes you from, oh my God, I hate that person. Look what they did to me. Why did they do this? To finding, okay, where in my life is this showing me something that I have to work on? Just really enables you to live like in a like a growth mindset, because you're always looking to like change that part of you that was triggered rather than blaming it on someone else, right? I think we spend our entire lives blaming our problems on someone else. And it isn't until you get to the fact that you're like, right, at the end of the day, these are my problems and I'm the only one that I can deal with, like that can deal with them, that your life can shift and change in the way you want it to, because you have to take that radical responsibility for the things that happen to you, and the idea that you aren't in control of other people's actions. So regardless of whether they hurt your feelings or they didn't, you can't control them. So all you can control is your response and your reaction and what you're going to do next. You get what I mean?
I do. Radical responsibility. I love that term because as you were talking, I was like, you're basically taking the ultimate form of accountability, right? Because that means that everything that you're triggered by is ultimately your responsibility. And as you were talking, I was thinking about that saying, something that used to baffle me was like, oh, what is it? It's like, if someone's saying something bad behind your back, it's none of your business. And I'm sitting there, this was the old version of me. I'm sitting there, I'm like, what the frick are you talking about? If they're talking badly about me, I want to know about it. Why can't they say it to my face, right? I used to get my back up about it. And now I'm like, that's so true. Like whatever negative opinion or issue that someone's got with me in some capacity, that's actually on them, because there's something triggering them about me, in their life or within their internal world. And that's actually their business. It really isn't mine. And I don't have to take that on, and the same thing, if that were to happen, with me, like with Sarah Jessica Parker, she didn't have to take it on that, one of her fans was upset because she wasn't perfect. That's my responsibility. That's my perception. And I've got to be accountable for that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the magical things about the internet is like, so say 30 years ago, you would only see like the perfect version of these successful people. You'd see like all the things they do well and all the success they're having and their beautiful house and how their hair always looks perfect. But with the internet and with social media and having access to these people's lives, and a lot of people in this space, are very transparent. So we get to see them like crying on the couch with their dog on a Sunday, or like the day they crash their car, or when they fall up the stairs at an awards event. We get to see, we don't just see the highlight reel anymore. We get to see even these like magical, successful people who are changing the world. We still get to see them on their bad days too, which I think is so great, just for us all in general to be like, we are all human. We all fuck up sometimes, and that's okay. If you didn't fuck up, you're not a human. Those people don't exist.
It actually makes them way more likable, and like even Sarah Jessica Parker, I like her heaps more now. It took me a little while to get to that conclusion, because it just was a classic case of expectations unmet, but they were supposed to be met in an entirely different way, right? And so when you know that people aren't perfect, and that whole phase on Instagram where it was like, oh, Instagram perfect versus reality, like it made people laugh. And that's why people like Celeste, I think her name's Celeste Barber on Instagram, she makes a mockery of all these perfect models and actors and actresses in a really funny way, because she's like, a little bit chubby because she's got a normal body, and then she makes fun of things and people find it hilarious. Even, the people that she makes fun of repost this sort of stuff because they just find it absolutely, funny as. Like, I think the whole perfectionism thing is starting to go out the door, because it's just totally unachievable. We all know that there's so many images that are airbrushed out there. And if I've got to bring it back to business as well, I remember a lesson that I learned in my network marketing business way back when was, they were telling us, because I thought I've got to buy everything. So not my mistake, but what I perceived was right at the time was that I've literally got to buy all the products, everything that I needed for markets and parties. And I spent thousands of dollars, right? Like if I could go back in time, I'd do it a bit differently. And the problem with that was, even though it looked totally professional and I had all my shit together, when I went to go do these parties or markets, it made that other person think, oh my God, I need all that stuff. That's going to cost me too much money. I don't know if I'm prepared for all of that. That's overwhelming. And so it would actually repel them from signing up as a downline or, signing up with the company. And when I scaled it back and I was more like down to earth and the girl next door, that's when people were more attracted to joining, So it's a really interesting psychology behind that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm a really big affirmation fan. So I use affirmations a lot in my life and in my business. And one of my affirmations was like, done is better than perfect. So it's better for me to write a blog post and get it done and get it out there, because the people that need it are going to find it, rather than I sit with it on my laptop for 3 months and it's never perfect enough and I don't share it. And then that's just wasted energy. So I think when you start a business, we want it to be perfect, and we want everyone to see, oh, wow, look, that's so perfect. Look at how great they are at what they do. But at the end of the day, it's better to like get your shit done and it not be, that perfect version that you thought it could be or should be, than not get it out there at all. I think so many people are held back by, oh, but like, what if this isn't as good as it could be? But just remembering that getting it done is better than it being perfect.
Girl, you're preaching to the choir right now. Turn this volume up 100%, because that's what I was doing. Like, I was spending so much time in the planning phase of everything that when I moved on to something else, like that stuff never came to life. So I'm really big on the whole done is better than perfect. And anyone that follows my stuff on Instagram, especially Instagram stories, half the time I've got no makeup on. You can see a pimple or two. I've got my hair all over the place because my hair has a mind of its own. Like, I figure it's better to be authentic and real and do what I'm actually doing at the time that I'm doing it than having like the perfectly curated, perfect image Instagram story where I say everything just perfectly and then make you think that you've got to be like that, because you really don't. Like, you literally don't. Even Oprah has bad hair days, you know, and that sort of stuff. Like, do you think she would be where she's at now if she got stuck in that perfectionism loop? Absolutely not. Like, she would not be where she is now if she did that.
Yeah, and I think Instagram stories is a really great place to kind of learn that, because when you're building like a personal brand, Instagram stories is a great place that you can just like hop on at any point, you know. So by just doing it all the time, you learn that what, like, a thing for me was like my message is far more important than anything else going on around me. And like, we're real people, you know, so you learn that people are going to watch your videos whether you have your hair done, have your makeup on, or with me, normally I'm like in a onesie next to a radiator because it's freezing in England. But your message doesn't change regardless of whether you look perfect or you're in your PJs. You know, it's like, it's about your message is the important thing, and how you look really has nothing to do with it. People want to know that you're a real human being with real emotions that has experienced this. They don't really care if, you know, you have mascara on that day. I actually like quit wearing makeup about probably like 3 years ago, just because I was really kind of trying to create a life where, you know, I filled it with things that made me happy. And I found that I wasn't putting makeup on because I liked it. I was doing it because I thought I should. And when I quit wearing makeup, no one even noticed, you know, like no one goes, oh, like you're in the shop, and they're not like, oh, do you have foundation on today? Like, no one cares. And I'm like, I just got back 20 minutes of my life every single day. And now if I'm like going on a date or something, I put some mascara on and I'm like, oh, I'm so pretty. Look how pretty I am. But yeah, just, I don't know, that was a side story, but there we are.
I love the tangent. And you know what? Even this podcast episode isn't perfect, because like, even if this bit gets edited out because of the like at this, probably the first 20 minutes of this podcast episode that we had connection issues, guys, that my editor's probably going to try and fix for us. And then there's like been tapping noises, which has been as we've been talking. So that's probably not going to be able to be taken out. And it's, you know, I just think, you know what, at least it's done. You know, it's better than trying to like going, you know what, Rachel, let's cancel, let's book in another time and let's try and repeat this, you know, and, you know, because that would be such a pain in the ass, because we've just been like riffing and it's been off the cuff and natural and organic. And if we were to do it all over again at another date, it wouldn't be the same energy, we wouldn't be in the same vibe, we wouldn't be talking about the same stuff. And then it would just all be lost, you know. So done is better than perfect, guys. Like, I can tell you right now, this podcast episode audio is not going to be the best ever. And if you look at other people too, like someone I think of, two people actually come to mind that I really admire. Well, actually three of them, but the first one I'll talk about is Amanda Francis. She is like a multimillionaire, like crushing it, and has been for many, many years. And she does podcast episodes on her mobile phone, right? Like, not perfect audio equipment, not perfect lighting sometimes, like, and she's got the same mentality of like, done is better than perfect, right? You know, taking the opportunity of being in a great energy or having a message to share and just recording it and getting it out there. And even like Angie Lee, you know, she's a business coach now too, but she used to be in health and wellness. And she was talking about how when she signed up to coaching, she thought that she'd have to be like, you know, Barbie standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, when actually she was like in her yoga pants all day, you know, doing stuff from home, right? So she took away that perfectionism thing too. And so she didn't let that get in her way. And even like my business coach, Donna, like she quit makeup ages ago as well, because she's like, why am I spending half an hour getting ready for a Facebook Live? And then by the time I get on the live, I'm not feeling as inspired anymore, but I look great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And I think that was kind of another block for my abundance too. It's like, I was worried that, you know, if I start making money and I start like really succeeding in my business, I have to be less like myself, you know. So I was like scared to make money and scared to step into this version of me, because I was scared that I would have to be that, you know, perfect version of someone who's like put together, when really I'm just like this hot mess, like flapping around all the time. But that's just not what life is, you know. Like, life is about you being authentic, and I can be successful and abundant and myself all the time, because that's why my message hits the people that it needs to hit, because they are also hot messes just trying to figure life out, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, we all are. We're all literally like, it was funny. I grew up thinking that once I hit a certain point in my life, I'd have everything sorted out and it would be perfect and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, you look around and you look at people ahead of you and behind you and different ages and ethnicities and races and jobs and all this sort of stuff. And you're just like, everyone's just doing the best that they can with what they know. Like everyone is figuring this shit out as they go. It's kind of like what I imagine, you know, a lot of my friends that have had kids, they're like, we don't know. We've just read a couple of books or we've winged it. Like, we don't know. We're trialing and erroring it at the moment. We're just figuring it out as we go because nobody actually knows. Our job is to make ourselves happy, project a better energy out into the world and live our life, you know, and that's how I kind of think of it as anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to just go around to people and just be like, "Psst," like no one has any idea what they're doing. Like, just so you know, no one, like no one has, we're all just like figuring it out as we go along. And I would love like eventually to kind of do like, to be a speaker in like high schools and just prepare them like, you guys, like no one knows what they're doing. You know, like those 25-year-old people that you see with their life together. I'm like, their life isn't together. They're still figuring it out. You're going to be figuring it out forever. It's okay. And just like give people this idea that it's okay to not know what you're doing, because really no one knows what they're doing, just no one talks about not knowing. So we think that like, well, they know what they're doing and I don't know what I'm doing, when they're like, I don't know what I'm doing either. Like no one knows what they're doing here, guys.
Wouldn't that be great if that's like our conversation from this point on? It's just like, hey, like you catch up for like a cocktail with a friend and you're like, hey, what's going on in your life? Oh, this is going on, but I don't know what I'm doing. And then you're like, yeah, me neither. Cool. We both know
Yeah.
what we're doing. You know what I mean? Like how much more honest
Yeah.
and real would conversations be if we really acted like that authentically and were that honest with each other?
And the bartender's like, yeah, I don't have any idea either. And we're all like, hooray.
I love it. I love it. So Rachel, tell me, where can people find you?
So on Facebook, I hang out on my Facebook group called Brains, Beauty, Bravery. Or you can check out my blog on my website, which is rachaelami.com. And on Instagram too, I'm intuitivelife_coach. And I would love you guys to come hang out with me.
Yeah, I love that too. And I just love the fact that like this episode was supposed to be 30 minutes and I've just looked at the time and it's probably like, you know, double, triple that. It's like an hour and a half now, which I think is great. Do you know what I mean? Because when you can just kind of go with the flow, trust the process, like isn't it crazy how like in business, you know, I'm a big attraction marketing fan, right? And law of attraction and all that manifesting stuff. But isn't it fascinating that like we found each other randomly on Facebook? We happen to be in similar Facebook groups through mutual people that we know. And then here you are on my podcast and it's like a half an hour chat has turned into like an hour and a half because it's been so relatable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think obviously the reason we connected was both being in, you know, relationships with narcissistic men, which we never would have known had we not started a conversation, you know. And I think another one of those things of having trust and faith in the universe that it will bring you the correct things and the correct people at the correct time has so much power in it too. So I'm always like, you know, the right things just find me. And because I have that, you know, idea and that belief, the right things do just find me at the right time. So that's really cool, and the right people. And yeah, it's just been the best. Like I'm so happy that we got to talk throughout this whole time.
Yeah, I love that belief system because that's mine as well. And I love too when you have the mindset of like everything comes so easily and effortlessly, which it actually did in our case as well. It just kind of reconfirms that notion and that belief system. And I think that really does serve us, you know, in more areas than one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you really internalize that belief that the right things happen to you at the right time, then you just start to find more evidence and more magical things happen. And just by letting go and relaxing into life and into your journey, you just open yourself up for so much more magic to be experienced.
Yeah, like you're exactly where you're meant to be right now, whatever that looks like. You know, whether it's painful, whether it's pleasurable, whether it's high, low, up, down, black, white, whatever, like wherever you're at is where you're meant to be. And I think when you come from that level of surrender and acceptance, but also not laziness, just kind of like accepting, okay, this is my journey, this is where I'm meant to be, everyone's figuring their shit out, so am I. It makes you feel more at peace and okay with the journey of life, which I think is great because it's great to have that sort of mindset and belief system in business as well.
Yeah, and if you are in a creative kind of business and you want to take this inspired action, like if you're constantly fighting where you think you're meant to be or when you think you're meant to be experiencing, you're not going to be in the correct space to take those inspired actions. Whereas once you allow life to happen to you and say that whatever situation I'm in is serving me in some way right now, you open yourself up to these inspired actions, like us starting up a conversation, or even with my business coach when I just randomly DM'd her one day. And all these things like wouldn't have happened if I was trying to follow up. This is how I start my business. This is my plan. This is what I'm going to do. If I tried to stick to that, I wouldn't have had all these amazing experiences, just because sometimes you have to just let life happen to you.
Yeah, because it's always working for you and not just to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's always going to work out in your favor in some capacity. And whatever your journey is doesn't have to look the exact same as mine or Rachel's or someone else's or the Pope's or whatever, right? Like, your journey is uniquely yours and it doesn't have to be the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
You liked the Pope comment, didn't you?
Yeah, just imagining if I was the Pope, that would be a whole other level of, craziness.
It was like the first person that popped into my mind. But anyway, thank you for listening, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I certainly did. And a big thank you to Rachael for even, being willing to jump on and just speaking your truth and talk about your journey. Like, I really do appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been amazing. Thank you for having me.
No problems. Talk to you soon.
Bye.